Welcome to the DX Today podcast, your daily deep dive into the AI ecosystem. I'm Chris, and joining me as always is Laura.
Great to be here, Chris, and I have been counting down to this one because today, Friday, July 17th of 2026, is arguably the biggest single launch day we have seen all year in artificial intelligence.
That is a bold claim given the year we have had, so let's get right into it. Google DeepMind just pushed Gemini 3.5 Pro to general availability, and the headline numbers are honestly a little hard to wrap your head around.
They really are. The centerpiece is a 2 million token context window, which is double anything else in the current frontier field, and it makes this the largest production context window available from any major provider anywhere in the world right now.
Okay, so before we go any further, I want you to translate that for the people in the audience who do not think in tokens. What does 2 million tokens actually mean in practical everyday terms for a normal person using this thing?
Sure, so a token is roughly 3/4 of a word in English, which means 2 million tokens works out to about 1.5 million words that the model can hold in its head at one time.
1.5 million words. So to put that in perspective, that is roughly the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, plus the Bible, plus a few years of your company's meeting notes, all sitting in working memory simultaneously.
Exactly. And that framing matters because context window size has quietly become one of the most important competitive battlegrounds in AI. It determines whether the model actually remembers page 1 of your contract when it is reasoning about page 400.
Right, because we have all had that experience where a chatbot just seems to forget what you told it 20 minutes ago, and you end up repeating yourself like you are talking to a distracted teenager who lost interest.
That is precisely the failure mode this is designed to kill. And what makes this release different from a routine version bump is that Google says this model was rebuilt on an entirely new pre-training run, not just fine-tuned on top of the old one.
Explain why that distinction matters, because I think a lot of listeners hear version numbers like 3.1 and 3.5 and assume every release is basically the same model with a fresh coat of paint on it.
A new pre-training run means Google went back to the foundation and trained the base model from scratch on updated data with updated methods, which is enormously expensive, easily hundreds of millions of dollars in compute, but it raises the ceiling on what the model can do.
As opposed to fine-tuning, which is more like teaching an existing employee some new skills rather than hiring and educating an entirely new person from the ground up. That is a genuinely different level of investment and ambition.
Right, and you can see the ambition in the second headline feature, which is Deep Think. This is an extended reasoning mode where the model deliberately explores multiple lines of attack on a hard problem before it commits to an answer for you.
Now here's where I want to push back a little bit because DeepThink is not available to everyone, is it? My understanding is that Google has gated it behind the Ultra subscription, which costs a fairly serious amount of money.
Correct. DeepThink sits behind the Ultra tier at $250 a month. And that pricing decision might honestly be the most consequential part of this entire launch when you think about where the industry is heading.
$250 a month is real money for an individual, and it tells you something about who Google thinks this feature is actually for. That is not a consumer price point, that is a professional tools price point.
It absolutely is, and it continues a trend we have been watching all year, where the frontier labs are splitting their offerings into a mass market tier that is cheap or free and a premium reasoning tier priced like a Bloomberg terminal for knowledge workers.
Which raises an uncomfortable question about access, right? If the best reasoning capabilities in the world cost $3,000 a year, we are potentially creating a two-class system of people who can afford serious AI assistance and people who cannot.
That concern is legitimate, and I share it, though the counterargument is that capability has been trickling down fast. Features that were premium exclusives 18 months ago are now free everywhere. So the premium tier functions as a preview of what everyone eventually gets.
That is fair. The paid tier is essentially subsidizing the research that eventually becomes the free tier. Okay, let's talk about the third pillar of this launch because to me it might be the most interesting one, the autonomous workflow capabilities.
This is the part that has enterprise customers genuinely excited. Gemini 3.5 Pro can take a complex goal, break it down into subtasks on its own, execute each subtask, and then synthesize all the results back into one coherent deliverable for you.
So walk me through a concrete example of that. Because autonomous workflow is exactly the kind of phrase that sounds impressive in a press release and then turns out to mean something disappointing in practice. What does it actually do?
Say you handed a due diligence job, like evaluate this acquisition target. It will decide on its own to analyze the financials, then review the contracts, then research the market, then check the competitive landscape, and then merge everything into one assessment.
And the key difference from before is that you did not have to spell out those 5 steps yourself. Previously, you were the project manager feeding the model one task at a time. And now the model is the project manager.
Exactly. And notice how beautifully that pairs with the 2 million token context window? Because an agent that is managing a long multi-step project needs to remember everything it has done so far. And now it has the memory to actually do that.
That is a good point. The features reinforce each other. A big brain with no memory is useless for long projects. And a big memory with no reasoning is just an expensive filing cabinet. You need both halves working together.
And Google clearly knows it because they did not launch this cold. The model spent months in a limited enterprise preview on Vertex, where big customers got all-out list access through their Google Cloud account teams and hammered on it with real workloads.
Which is a notable shift in launch strategy, right? The old playbook was a splashy consumer demo and a viral moment on social media. And this playbook is quietly proving the thing out with corporate customers before the public ever touches it.
It tells you where the money is. Consumer subscriptions are nice, but the trillion-dollar prize is enterprise workloads. And enterprises do not care about viral demos. They care about reliability, security reviews, and whether the thing breaks their compliance requirements.
All right, let's talk about the competitive landscape because Google is not launching into a vacuum here. OpenAI shipped its GPT 5.6 family just 4 days ago with a very deliberate focus on token efficiency and agentic work.
And the contrast in philosophy is fascinating. OpenAI's pitch this week was essentially, we do more with fewer tokens, so your bills go down. While Google's pitch today is we give you more tokens than anyone else has ever offered, so you can do bigger things.
Efficiency versus scale. That is almost a perfect ideological split. One company is optimizing the cost per task, and the other is expanding the size of the task you can even attempt. Which side of that argument do you find more persuasive?
Honestly, I think they're both right for different customers. If you are running millions of small customer service interactions, efficiency wins every time. But if you're a law firm dropping an entire litigation record into one prompt, scale is the only thing that matters.
And presumably, the pricing will sort those customers into the right buckets. Speaking of pricing, Google has been cagey about what the Pro tier will cost through the API. But there is some history here that gives us a clue, right?
There is, and it is a slightly ominous clue. When Gemini 3.5 Flash launched, it came in at $1.50 per million input tokens and $9 per million output tokens, which was roughly triple the cost of its predecessor.
Triple. So the pattern seems to be that each generation gets meaningfully better and meaningfully more expensive at the same time, which cuts against the old assumption that AI prices only ever go down over time as the technology matures.
Right, the era of automatic price deflation in AI seems to be pausing, at least at the frontier, because these new pre-training runs and giant context windows are brutally expensive to serve, and somebody has to pay for all that compute infrastructure eventually.
And that somebody is the customer. Although I will note the interesting wrinkle from the benchmark data, which is that the cheaper Flash model was already beating the older Pro model on most tests before today. Tell people about that.
Yes, this surprised a lot of people. Gemini 3.5 Flash beat the older 3.1 Pro on 6 of 8 published benchmarks, including coding and agentic tasks, even though Flash is the budget model and Pro was the flagship.
Although not on everything, right? My understanding is the older Pro model still held the lead on the hardest pure reasoning benchmark, the one they call Humanity's Last Exam, which suggests raw reasoning depth is still a separate axis from general capability.
Exactly right. The older Pro scored about 44% on that exam versus about 40% for Flash, and that gap is precisely what DeepThink is designed to blow open. Google is betting that deliberate, slow reasoning is worth paying premium prices for.
Okay, I want to zoom out to the geopolitics for a minute, because the timing of this launch is not an accident, is it? Today is also the opening day of the World Artificial Intelligence Conference over in Shanghai.
And not just any edition of it. Xi Jinping is attending in person for the first time in the event's history, and 29 countries are signing an agreement there to establish a new intergovernmental AI cooperation body headquartered in Shanghai.
But on the very same day, China is positioning itself as the convener of a global AI governance bloc. Google drops the most capable model on the planet. That reads like a deliberate message about where the technological frontier actually lives.
It certainly functions as one, whether or not Google admits the timing was strategic. The through line of 2026 has been that AI is now a genuine two-superpower race, and product launches have become moves on that geopolitical chessboard.
Which is a strange new reality for what is, at the end of the day, a software release. 10 years ago, a new Google product got reviewed by the tech blogs, and today it gets read as a statement of national industrial strategy.
And the split is deepening because the countries signing that Shanghai Agreement are largely not Western allies. So we are watching the world sort itself into AI spheres of influence, with American models on one side and Chinese models increasingly dominant on the other.
Let's bring it back down to earth for the ordinary listener before we wrap up. If I am not an enterprise buyer or a policy person, what does today's launch actually change for me in my daily life and work?
In the near term, the free and low-cost Gemini tiers get smarter as this technology filters down. And in the medium term, the autonomous workflow stuff means the AI tools inside your email, documents, and spreadsheets will start finishing whole jobs instead of drafting fragments.
And I would add that the 2 million token context quietly changes what you can ask for. Uploading your entire project archive or your whole personal knowledge base and just talking to it becomes a normal, boring thing you do on a Tuesday.
That is the real story to me, honestly. Context on this scale dissolves the boundary between chatting with an AI and giving it your whole world, and that shift will create both wonderful capabilities and some very serious new privacy questions we will be discussing for years.
On that note, we will keep watching how the pricing lands, how the benchmarks shake out once independent testers get their hands on it, and what OpenAI and Anthropic do in response, because they will absolutely respond quickly.
They always do, and my prediction is we see a context window announcement from at least one competitor before the summer is out, because nobody at the frontier can afford to let Google own the biggest memory in the business for long.
That's all for today's episode of the DX Today podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.